I'm Chip Hanna, and this is the For You Leaders podcast featuring Kirk Dando, where we truly go beyond the veneer. You'll experience the raw and the real of leadership. Today, companies giving back seems like the cool thing to do. Companies like Tom's and Warby Parker have made giving back trendy. But today, we're talking with someone who knew that giving back was the right thing to do way before it was the trendy thing to do. Today, we're talking to the CEO of Amplify Credit Union, Paul Trylko. You've known Paul for quite a while, right, Kirk?
That's right, Chip. Paul's a longtime friend and client. I really admire his do the right thing attitude, especially when it comes to leadership. As you know, this podcast is called For You Leaders. And to me, Paul embodies the definition of a for you leader. And he really does it naturally. In fact, in his own words, he says,
"Because I don't know any other way to do it."
Paul always provides me with sage advice and wisdom. I believe you're going to be able to learn from one of the best, most humble leaders I know. I got the chance to talk with Paul about leadership. Listen in as I ask him, what are the first things that you remember about being the CEO of Amplify?
The thing that I remember the most, maybe, is being totally honored to have the opportunity to serve in that capacity. And like I think with any other job I've had before I had it, I thought, well, that's easy enough to do. And then when you get the job, you realize there's a heck of a lot more to it than I thought. So I remember that realization. Maybe another thing that kind of hit me, or you learn pretty quickly as CEO, you always heard it's lonely at the top. Began to understand what that meant because you had to seek other alternative for, somebody to bounce ideas off of in some cases. So that hit me. Those are kind of early observations and things that I learned along the way.
So talk a little bit about being lonely at the top. I kind of have my experiences and beliefs of why it's lonely at the top. What are your experiences, or what are your beliefs why it's so lonely?
Well, yeah, lonely is maybe a general term, but I think it really kind of comes down to there are certain things that you as the CEO have to be looking out for, and you can't go to your team to discuss those things. Or, what you would normally do is talk to your peers in the organization. And guess what? You don't have any anymore. So you have to kind of process those yourselves or seek outside counsel to help you through some of those philosophical or validate what you're thinking.
One of the things that you have talked about in the past that I really admire is that you are very mission driven. Talk a little bit about the mission of Amplify and what it means to you and how it's impacted your leadership.
Well, the mission for Amplify, really as a credit union, we're a financial cooperative. So our members literally own the credit union. So our mission, although as a not-for-profit, we do have to make a profit, our mission is generally to serve our members. But as time has gone on, what we want to really try to do is not only serve our members, and it's one of the the cooperative principles is to serve our community. And we want to really up that game so we can not only serve our members, but serve our communities, which is where we all live and work anyhow. So serving the community actually in a roundabout way serves our members as well. So how can we give back to our community, give back to our members? We're kind of looking at this triple bottom line where it's like give back to members, give back to community. And guess what? We give back to our employees as well, because they're the ones that provide the service.
Well, and talk a little bit about how that has impacted how you think as a leader, because, everyone has a mission statement, everybody has a vision statement, everything else like that. But there's a continuum of level of seriousness and urgency around that because it's part of your core beliefs or it's just a really cool, catchy phrase. and I've seen you, it really is part of your DNA, who you are.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that I find it's the circle of life. If we do a good job serving and we generate the profits that we can give back to our members and we can give back to the community, then it just gives us more value, that allows us to do it more and more. So it keeps building. For me, being in this industry, I mean, I feel like I've benefited from it. We get the dubious honor of, it's not dubious, it's just an honor to be able to serve our members, but at the same time, not with necessarily an only profit focus. That way, it's kind of fun to go into a boardroom and go, how do we give this money back? We've made enough. How do we give it back? Which I've always considered, a privilege to be able to work in that environment. And it gets your eyes focused not just on the business part of the equation, but what we're really here to do, and it's to serve people.
As you know, the name of this podcast is For You Leaders Podcast. And talk to me a little bit about just top of mind, when I say For You Leaders, what does that mean to you?
That would mean to me that you're not just about, what quickly came to mind was servant leadership, in the sense of, as a leader, sometimes they look to you for all the answers. And that's really not the way it really plays out, at least in my experience, is, my job is to, remove obstacles, try to get out in front and help our folks accomplish what they need to do to reach their full potential. Because if everybody reaches their full potential, we lift the lid on the organization, and everybody does well. And most of all, our members do. So that's kind of what I see.
Well, and that's just so easy all the time, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's interesting because, that type of leadership, that what you termed For You, might be a little harder because it's more collaborative and it's cooperative. It takes more time. It's not harder in my mind because I don't know any other way to do it. But I think it does take more time. So it's not the easiest thing to do, but it gets more buy-in. And everybody's marching to the same beat and to the same drum.
What's one aha moment that you have experienced as a leader, as a CEO?
I find myself thinking, this is what came to mind, and, it's probably not going to be that flattering, but it was more of something that didn't work out so well. I can think shortly after I became CEO, and this is a while back, so we all know that it turned out okay. We had an unfortunate situation as regards a fraud loss. And, I found myself kind of lamenting as I've been CEO for 6 months, and this may be the shortest tenure of any CEO ever. But at the same time, I rolled my sleeves up, did the job, and it wasn't anything we did. It was just something that happened to us. But you go through that process. And I remember kind of lamenting as kind of like, why is this, happening to me? And then heard that still small voice saying, well, that's why you're here. So I found myself going, okay. This is the job. This is the role. So I guess in that sense, it was an aha moment. It's like, okay, that is the role. You're to pull this together. And obviously it came out fine. And 18 years later, I'm still CEO. But that was a revelation for me at the time. Honestly, the things that didn't work out so well are the things that you learn the most from. And you can adapt. And what are you going to do differently the next time you're faced with adversity? Because you will be faced with adversity. It's like, how are you going to do that? So I think it's changed my thinking. It makes me more prepared, more proactive in preparing. Something that we always put on our, you do your annual strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we always put on our threat list what we don't know. But guess what? If you don't know it, it's always going to be a threat. So you prepare as much as you can from what you learned, and then you're going to face something else, new that comes up. But being able to learn, adapt, and go out again. You can't quit taking risks and taking chances, within the realm of your business, or, you can't hide from, those things, the bad things that might happen.
You're going to leave the organization, either sipping champagne or on a stretcher, as they say, but you're leaving one way or another. Talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that timing of when you start thinking about, transitions and doing all that.
For me, honestly, as you have been doing something a while, as I have, and are getting older, my mind has started shifting more to the development of the people that work with me and for me. And then how does this organization at some point transition to have a leadership transition? So I've been thinking a lot more along those lines and putting plans in place well out in front of any transition, because I owe that to the organization. So So thinking about those things well in advance, and then putting, in some cases, putting the wheels in motion early to make sure, you get the desired outcomes.
So when you say well in advance, give me a time frame. Like how far out in advance have you started thinking about these things, either, internally and creating influence around those, or explicitly and doing?
Yeah, there's probably actionable, more probably 5 years out. When I thinking about this, you think about it, as time goes on, but then in earnest putting things in place, it may have been longer than that. Now that I think about it, with some of the things we've done as far as compensation and how we're setting things up for the organization. So I think you have to be well out in front. A transition shouldn't just be something that just happens. At least that's my perspective on it.
No, very true. I think a lot of times people think about it a year, prior to. Like you said, they take action on it about a year prior to, and then it's just oftentimes there's just not enough time to let kind of the dust settle on some things. So,
right.
So I admire that that's the way you're thinking about it. Tell me a little bit about what you think the single biggest stumbling block is for our leaders.
Quite honestly, I think the biggest stumbling block may be ourselves. And what I mean by that is, when you get this leadership role, and it doesn't have to be a CEO role, any leadership role. Sometimes you'll have a tendency to think, I need to know all the answers, and that's just not the case. You've got good folks that, if you hire well, you've got good folks working in the organization that can supply those answers. And I really firmly believe that it's a CEO's responsibility and any leader's responsibility to allow their people to develop. So I have to continue to grow, and I have to let my people grow. So we just kind of lift the lid on the organization about as far as our potential, on a daily basis. So, the stumbling block may be continuing to learn. We need to continue to learn. We don't have all the answers, continue to seek. I think that's really important. And that ties in with leadership development and developing the organization. We were talking about transitions earlier that allows an organization to transition seamlessly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that oftentimes is you can talk to people about the issue of growth, and everybody buys into the concept that growth is important, is needed, but very few people truly, if you play the tape, commit themselves to the process of growing. So what are some things that you do to commit yourself to the process of growing?
From a growth standpoint, I've certainly, participated and had executive coaching over time. I do seek outside counsel for different things. I guess like everybody, I go to conferences, I read a lot, try to stay up on what's happening. Probably more so to learn is like, how can I learn from that and how can I apply it to the organization? So, and I've gotten a lot, over time, in my role, I've got a bigger percentage of my time that's external to the organization, whether it be in the community or within our industry in a legislative capacity, and learning about that. So how can I help not only our credit union, but our industry and the community? So that helps you, learn and expand your horizons and perspective.
So I knowing you, I know you did not, this was not your motive at all. So I'll give you a second to think about this. But being externalized like that and being on different boards and kind of rubbing elbows with other leaders, how has that helped you be more effective in your role? I know you didn't do it for selfish reasons to kind of just do that, but just as a byproduct of that happens. Think a little bit about how that, just the awareness that's created in you, either through a mentor, a peer, and modeling what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. I think getting outside of your organization and what we were talking about, getting externalized a little bit, helps you get different perspectives, see the way things are done elsewhere. You learn a little bit from that. Like I said, getting perspectives, even from people that are not in your industry, I think is helpful, because leadership is leadership regardless of what type of organization you're in. So I think it's expanded my horizons. I've seen how things fit together, better, not only for, the industry, but for our organization. So that gives me a frame of reference, and it gives me a a wide variety of contacts too. It's kind of amazing, the resources and the knowledge of the people that you can reach out to as you go through your daily walk.
So some people listening to this might think, well, wow, that's great. He gets an opportunity to work on the business. I would love to get to that point. I'm so buried in just working in the business every single day. I can't even do that. What advice would you give to the person that's thinking that or feeling that?
I would encourage them to work on it, because my journey has been an evolution. So it's not like I've done this way the entire time I've been CEO, but encourage you to be intentional about how do I get there where I can externalize. And I think that's what I've done is I've kind of looked back and it's like, how did I get the time? I mean, because you have to have a team that gives you the time to do these things. You find out if you spend time on creating leadership development opportunities for your team and hiring process and to get the right people in place, it allows the organization to grow and give. What it provides is you the opportunity to externalize yourself a little bit, but it also gives everybody else in the organization to reach their potential too.
Talk a little bit about how we met.
Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting because I'll tell other people the story. It's like, I've known Kirk a long time, but I didn't start working with him until, 6 years ago. We had an issue in the organization, just for lack of a better word, is team dynamics. And I had really done everything I knew how to do without success. And it's kind of like, I'm going to need some help. And we actually went out and sought, RFPs. But, it's like the light bulb hit me. It's like, Kirk could probably help me with this. And as it turned out, that's what we did. And so we worked together. And we have been working together on these kind of things ever since. I think that relationship has evolved too, to go on to other things. I think at that time, we had some challenges. Team dynamics was one, but those team dynamic challenges, I think, had really begun to show up in the results of the organization. So it's like, okay. I remember our first engagement, that gut check was, you kind of challenging me, say, okay, here's the job at hand. We had gone through the process of looking what we had, and, it's like, are you up for this? And fortunately, I answered yes. I appreciated being challenged. It's like, okay, this is going to be, hard work. So I can look back. Obviously, it's 6 years later, and I'm still doing what I'm doing. So I can look back and say, well, it was worth the effort to go through that. But how we've approached things since that. And the thing that was about the team dynamics was really in the context of the business itself. How do we support what we're trying to accomplish as an organization? I think I said earlier about personnel issues. It always kind of comes down to we've got to all be about what the organization is trying to accomplish. And generally, those things are something we already all agree on anyhow.
Yeah. Was there a time where you felt like throwing in the towel, where it was just like, you maybe never said it out loud, but just internally you were like, I don't know, maybe time.
I don't know if I ever got to the point of, there were times of anxiety and, where you're going through the process, you're doing the hard work. And then, you hadn't seen the payoff yet, that you would get frustrated. I don't know that I ever got to the point of wanting to throw in the towel, simply because, I figured, somebody'd have to throw the towel in for me. Because I wasn't gonna, but yeah, there's a lot of anxiety or stress going through that process. It's a lot of hard work.
What do you do personally to relieve that stress or to not get covered up by it?
Well, probably two things come to mind. One is pray a lot. Give things up in prayer. I know there's a grander thing going on, and my work is important, but I've got to keep that in perspective. And then I've been really blessed with strong family support to help me through those the reality checks of probably those two things are the things that I think that that help you through it. And then maybe having the conviction, this is probably more on a personal note, when you decide, I've always been accused of being analytic, which I am. But I would say this, once I've decided what I believe to be right, I will move forward with that in my own way. So maybe some resolution or resolve towards, I've got to go down this path. These are the right things to do, and I will make sure that happens. But, having that family support, because you're spending a lot of time when you're going through, business cycles that, aren't as favorable as you'd like. You spend more time. So you need to have that strong family support.
I want to thank Paul for coming on the For You Leaders podcast. I really enjoyed listening and learning from him. It's my hope that you did too. I really love his simple but very powerful approach to just do the right thing. In this day and age, it's something that we oftentimes forget, but it's something that's easy to apply. And I think that the world is really starving for you leaders. And Paul is really for his employees and for his members and for the community. I want you to ask, could you hear that come through in his responses and his tone and the cadence and the things that he talked about? Maybe more important than that, could people really see the same qualities in you? Chip and I hope you are really enjoying these For You Leaders podcasts. We fundamentally believe that nothing impacts the health, wealth, and happiness of others more than a leader. And we believe that For You Leaders do it better than others. Like anyone else, we're starving for feedback. We would love to get your insights, good or bad. So if you would please do me a favor and leave us a review on iTunes, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening.